Why did the room go silent the moment she walked in? No one asked her name. No one pulled out a chair. 40 men sat shoulder to shoulder at the briefing table, boots lined perfectly beneath steel chairs, coffee steaming, confidence loud even when mouths were closed. She stood at the back, alone, blue t-shirt under her jacket, sleeves rolled once, not defiant, just present. They assumed she was lost. The projector hummed. The mission map glowed. Everyone leaned forward except her. She didn't need the screen yet. She already knew where this was going. She always did. Someone coughed, someone smirked. Then the instructor spoke. And last, we have a late addition. Eyes turned slowly, assessing, measuring. She's replacing Walker. That name landed heavy. Walker had been strong, respected, dead. A few heads shifted. Someone whispered, she. The woman didn't react. She never did at first contact. Reactions gave people power. Silence took it back. Name, someone asked too casually. She stepped forward, calm, measured. Don't worry, she said. I won't slow you down. A few chuckles, one loud laugh. The instructor didn't smile. She's here because she earned it. Still, no one moved aside. So she stood there, ignored. Invisible by choice or design, it didn't matter. She'd been ignored before, in worse places, with more at stake. She thought of the first time she'd learned the value of quiet. It was the moment she realized screaming never saved anyone. The mission briefing rolled on. Timelines, entry points, exit routes, casualty projections spoken like weather reports. The men nodded. She watched hands instead of faces. Microtells, tension, ego, fear disguised as bravado. One man sat back too far, relaxed, dangerous. Another leaned in too close, hungry to prove something. Then there was him. Garrett. He didn't stare, that would have been crude. He evaluated her like a problem he hadn't decided whether to solve or remove. His jaw was set, his hands still, someone used to control. When the briefing ended, chairs scraped, men stood, packs lifted. No one spoke to her. Garrett finally did. You know this isn't some headline thing, right? He said, voice low. People die here. She met his eyes, held them. I know. You don't look like you know. She smiled, not kindly. That's because knowing doesn't always look loud. He scoffed, we'll see. They always said that. The first drill was endurance. It always was. Break the body, then watch the mind scramble for excuses. Sand in places it didn't belong. Cold water that felt personal. Weight that punished hesitation. She didn't lead, didn't lag. She stayed exactly where she needed to be. Men dropped one by one. Someone vomited, someone cursed, someone quit without saying it out loud. She kept moving. Garrett noticed. He hated that he noticed. By the time the sun burned overhead, the whispers had changed. Not kinder, just quieter. Then came hand to hand. No weapons, no distance, just intent and bone and breath. Controlled, the instructor warned. This isn't about winning. Garrett stepped forward before names were called. I'll take her. She didn't object. That would have been weakness or pride. Both were useless. They touched gloves. His smile was sharp. Nothing personal. She nodded. Good. The first exchange was clean. Testing, he was strong, she was fast. The second came harder, ego leaked in. He wanted to teach her something. She let him. The moment came fast, a miscalculated spin, a punch she didn't fully evade, impact like a door slamming shut. The world tilted. Then nothing. Silence rushed in like water. She woke to voices echoing, pain blooming slow and deep. Was out cold. Too far. Someone knelt beside her, a hand on her shoulder, steady, familiar in a way that hurt. You're safe, a voice said quietly. She opened her eyes. Him, of all people. Time collapsed inward. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. He exhaled. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing." They carried her out as the room buzzed with something new. Not respect, not yet. Uncertainty. And uncertainty, she knew, was the beginning of truth. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, jaw throbbing, head heavy. She hadn't come here to prove herself. She'd come to find a leak. And someone had already tried to silence her. Why would someone risk everything just to stop her from training? The question followed her through the sterile halls, through the medical scans, through the quiet that comes after adrenaline fades. Concussion protocol, rest orders, mandatory observation. Time she didn't have. She watched shadows instead of screens, listened more than she spoke. Pain sharpened focus. It always had. The man who'd stopped the fight came back every day, always brief, always careful. "You should have stayed behind a desk," he said once. She smiled without warmth. "You should have trusted me years ago." He didn't argue, that was new. When she was cleared, she returned without ceremony, bruise still dark, jaw still stiff, head high. This time the room noticed. Garrett didn't look at her, not once. The training intensified. Navigation, decision-making under exhaustion, team drills that revealed more about character than skill ever could. She watched people when they thought no one was watching. The instructor, Everett, watched her too closely. Too carefully. That night she saw the file access logs. The pattern was subtle, clean, too clean. A desperate man made mistakes. A controlled one hid them. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, she waited. That was her strength, waiting without rotting from the inside. When the second shooting happened, it confirmed her fear. This wasn't about her. She was collateral. Someone was feeding information. Someone was panicking. And panic made people violent. By the time the lockdown came, she already knew where to look. She moved at night, quiet, invisible. The photograph on his desk stopped her. A teenage girl, bald head, IV lines, smile brave enough to break things. The moral weight settled heavy in her chest. Everyone sold something eventually. The question was always why. She planted the software and left with more questions than answers. When the trap was set, she didn't celebrate. She braced. The handoff happened faster than expected, voices sharp with fear, a gun drawn. She kicked the door before fear could catch up. The man turned, too slow. The takedown was efficient, brutal, controlled. When it was over, she stood there breathing hard, staring at the instructor on his knees, hands shaking, tears streaking a face carved by decades of discipline. "I just wanted her to live," he said. She believed him. That was the hardest part. The network unraveled in days. Names, buyers, flags that should never have crossed. Arrests were quiet. Careers ended without headlines. The girl got her treatment. The dead didn't come back. Garrett found her at dawn on the beach. "I was wrong," he said. She nodded. "So was I." He waited. About what? That strength needs permission. They stood there listening to waves erase footprints. She left weeks later, no ceremony, no applause. Just a nod from the man who'd once doubted her. And silence from the ones who now understood. She walked away lighter than she'd arrived, not because the weight was gone, but because she'd chosen to carry it anyway. Somewhere between dignity and duty, she'd found her balance. And sometimes she knew. The strongest people don't announce themselves. They endure. Why did the silence feel heavier now that she was awake? The medical bay smelled like disinfectant and quiet judgment. Machines hummed softly, indifferent to pain or pride. She lay flat, staring at a ceiling she didn't recognize, counting breaths the way she had learned to do when everything else felt unreliable. In, out. Her jaw throbbed with every heartbeat, a deep, pulsing reminder that she'd misjudged a moment. Just one, and here one moment was all it took. She turned her head slightly. A window, pale morning light creeping in. The base was waking up without her. That bothered her more than the pain. "You're not cleared to move yet." The voice came from the corner, calm, controlled, too familiar. She closed her eyes. "I didn't ask to move." A chair scraped softly, footsteps approached. "You took a full power shot to the jaw," he said. "Then your head bounced. That's not something you walk off." She opened her eyes and finally looked at him. Same posture, same watchful eyes, same way of standing like the room was a threat he'd already measured. Commander Caldwell, the man who'd pulled Garrett back, the man who shouldn't have been here. "You always show up after the damage is done," she said quietly. He didn't flinch. "You always put yourself where damage is likely." A beat. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "it's a pattern." Silence stretched between them, not awkward, just heavy with history neither of them wanted to unpack here, not yet. "How long?" she asked. "Unconscious, about 90 seconds. Her fingers curled slightly against the sheet. "And Garrett?" "Being handled." That answer told her everything and nothing. She exhaled slowly. "You shouldn't protect me," she said. "It compromises things." He studied her for a moment. "You were unconscious. That's not protection, that's obligation." She almost smiled, almost. The medic returned. Flashlight, questions, finger tracking, basic truths disguised as routine. When they were alone again, she spoke without looking at him. "You didn't come here by coincidence." "No." "Then don't insult me by pretending." He leaned back against the counter. "I came because you're not where you're supposed to be." "And yet," she said, "here I am." That earned a small nod, respect maybe, or resignation. "You're being underestimated," he said. She laughed softly, immediately regretted it as pain flared. "I always am." "That's dangerous." "It's useful." For the first time, something like a smile crossed his face, gone just as fast. "You're going to push yourself back into training the second they clear you," he said. "Yes." "And you'll pretend this didn't shake you." She turned her head, finally meeting his eyes. "It did shake me." That surprised him. "But fear isn't new," she continued. "It just has better timing now." He watched her carefully. "What are you really doing here?" She could have lied. She lied better under worse circumstances. But something about the sterile light, the dull ache, the weight of the near miss, it loosened something. "I'm counting," she said. "Counting what?" "Patterns, mistakes, people who don't behave like they should." He waited. 12 operators, she added quietly. Dead, same kind of ambush, same kind of foresight from the enemy. His jaw tightened. "I don't believe in coincidence," she finished. Neither did he. They discharged her 3 days later, with restrictions she fully intended to bend, if not break. The bruise on her jaw had faded to yellow and purple, a visible reminder she didn't bother hiding. When she stepped back into formation, the air shifted. Some men looked away, others stared openly. Not curiosity this time, calculation. Garrett stood at the far end, rigid, silent, different. "Good." The instructor's eyes lingered on her longer than protocol required. "Cleared?" he asked. "Yes, Master Chief." "Then you keep up or you're gone." She nodded. "Understood." They ran, harder than before, as if the base itself needed to remind her she was expendable. She welcomed it. Pain was honest. During navigation exercises, she partnered with a man who didn't ask questions. That alone told her he was smart. Declan, infantry background, eyes that scanned before speaking. "You don't move like an analyst," he said after an hour. She didn't answer. They reached the checkpoint ahead of schedule. He looked at her again. "You don't talk much. Talking wastes oxygen." That earned a quiet smile. By the third checkpoint, the heat pressed down like judgment. Sweat blurred vision. Mistakes happened here. She didn't make any. At the water cache, she saw Garrett. Their eyes met briefly. No hostility, no apology. Something unresolved. Good. Unresolved things made people careless. That night, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. "Your instructor accessed files he shouldn't have," Caldwell's voice said when she answered. "Recently, repeatedly." Her stomach tightened. "I was afraid of that." "Me too." Silence. "He's compromised," he said. "Or desperate," she replied. "Same outcome." "Not always." She sat on her bunk, staring at the wall. "I want access to his office." A pause. "That's illegal." "So is selling people's lives." Another pause, longer. "Midnight," he said, 2 hours. When the call ended, she lay back and stared at the ceiling. She thought of the photograph she hadn't seen yet, of the reason that would justify betrayal. There was always a reason. The question was whether it mattered. She moved through the building like memory, no wasted motion, no hesitation. The lock surrendered quietly. The office was exactly what she expected: order, discipline, nothing out of place. Until she saw the photo. She stood there longer than she should have. 16, bald, smiling. Hope in human form. Her chest tightened. She planted the software with practiced ease, but her hands were slower than usual. When footsteps paused outside the door, she felt the familiar calm settle in, the kind that only came when there were no good options left. The patrol moved on. She slipped back into the night, carrying something heavier than evidence. The next morning, she watched the logs. He took the bait. Exactly as predicted. That's when the fear changed shape. Because fear wasn't about being caught anymore. It was about what justice would cost someone who didn't deserve to lose everything. When the alarm sounded that afternoon, real, sharp, unmistakable, she already knew it wasn't random. Another shooting, another accident. This one wasn't meant to kill her. It was meant to distract. She scanned the room during the lockdown briefing. Faces, tension, guilt. Then she saw him. Average, forgettable, watching too closely. The handler. Her pulse slowed. The hunt was no longer theoretical. As she left the room, her phone buzzed again. "Office 30 minutes," Caldwell texted. "Come alone." She didn't. She brought resolve instead. Because somewhere between endurance and silence, she'd learned something most people never did. Being ignored doesn't make you weak. It makes you invisible. And invisible is where the truth hides best. Why did her instincts start screaming the moment she stepped into the hallway? Nothing looked wrong. That was the problem. The lights were steady. The air conditioning hummed its usual mechanical breath. Boots moved with discipline, voices stayed low, procedures followed to the letter. On the surface, the base was calm, too calm, like a held breath pretending to be rest. She slowed her pace without stopping, let the crowd thin, let patterns reveal themselves. Resolve first, emotion later. Caldwell's message replayed in her mind. Office, 30 minutes, come alone. He knew she wouldn't. She wasn't disobeying him by bringing awareness instead of backup. Awareness wasn't something you could order someone to leave behind. She turned a corner and caught her reflection in a darkened window. Bruise nearly gone now. Only a faint shadow under the skin. She looked normal, and that unsettled her more than looking broken ever had. Normal was camouflage. She entered the stairwell instead of the elevator. Cameras were predictable. Stairs gave you seconds. Seconds were currency. Halfway down, she heard it. A door closing too softly. She didn't turn. Turning confirmed suspicion. She kept moving, heart rate controlled, breathing steady, hand loose at her side. The second sound came behind her, footsteps adjusting, matching. She stopped abruptly. So did he. She turned slowly. The man was exactly as she remembered. Average height, average build, the kind of face that slipped out of memory the moment you looked away. He held a clipboard, neutral expression, professional. "Ma'am," he said, "Master Chief wants you rerouted, security protocol." Her eyes dropped briefly to his boots, scuffed on the outer edge. Civilian habit, not base issued. "Which protocol?" she asked. He hesitated for half a second. That was all she needed. She moved. The clipboard clattered. His hand went for his waistband. She closed the distance before fear could catch up. Elbow, throat, wall, controlled, brutal efficiency. He slid down, gasping, eyes wide with surprise more than pain. She knelt beside him. "Who sent you?" she asked calmly. He laughed through broken breath. "You already know." "No," she said, "I know who you want me to blame." That made him stop smiling. She stood and stepped back just as alarms blared. Red lights washed the stairwell in urgency. The base snapped into motion. She disappeared into it. By the time Caldwell reached the office, she was already inside. He locked the door behind him. "You didn't come alone," he said quietly. "No," she replied, "I came honest." She laid out what she'd seen. The handler, the fake protocol, the timing. "He's accelerating," Caldwell said. "That means pressure." "Or panic," she countered. "Same thing in a controlled man." She leaned against the desk, exhaustion finally surfacing. Not physical, moral. "I saw the photo," she said. Caldwell closed his eyes briefly. "She's his daughter." "I know. She needs treatment he can't afford." "I know." Silence filled the room, the kind that demanded a cost. "He didn't pull the trigger," Caldwell said. "He fed information, routes, schedules. And people died." "Yes." She nodded, no anger, just truth. "He didn't want this," Caldwell continued, "but once it started—" "It never stops," she finished, "until someone bleeds enough." He studied her. "You're not as detached as you pretend." "I'm not detached," she said. "I'm disciplined." There was a difference. One preserved humanity, the other erased it. They heard shouting outside, orders, running boots. "It's happening," Caldwell said. "He knows he's exposed." "Then he'll try to extract," she replied. "Or destroy evidence." "Or both." They moved fast, too fast for permission, not fast enough to outrun consequence. The hangar doors were already opening when they arrived, a transport warming up, crew tense, eyes darting. She scanned faces. There. The instructor stood near the ramp, calm, focused, saying goodbye to someone on a phone. Not desperate. Resolved. She stepped forward. He saw her immediately. Relief crossed his face, brief, genuine. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "That seems to be a theme," she replied. His eyes flicked to Caldwell behind her. "So," he said softly, "it's come to this." "Yes." He nodded, no denial, no theatrics. "She has a chance now," he said. "That's all I wanted." "She always did," Caldwell replied. "You just chose the wrong way to buy it." The instructor looked back at her. "You understand," he said, "not a question." She swallowed. "I understand why," she said, "not what." That seemed to matter. The transport crew shifted uneasily, weapons raised, uncertain. He reached into his jacket slowly. She tensed. He pulled out a photograph, held it up. "She smiles like her mother," he said. Then he dropped it and ran. Everything fractured. Commands shouted, weapons raised, chaos spilling into motion. She moved without thought, training and instinct braided into one clean decision. She cut left, anticipated his path, intercepted before the ramp. He stumbled, she grabbed him. They went down hard. He didn't fight. "I'm tired," he whispered. She pinned him gently, firm, final. "I know." Security swarmed, cuffs snapped, voices blurred. She stayed there a moment longer than necessary, close enough to hear him breathe, to feel the weight of what had been chosen. As they dragged him away, he looked at her one last time. "Don't let them forget her," he said. She nodded. "I won't." The base returned to order faster than it should have. Reports filed, statements sanitized, damage controlled. They always were. She sat alone that night, staring at the photograph now resting on her bunk. She hadn't told anyone she kept it. She thought of lines crossed, of loyalty twisted by love, of how easily good intentions curdled under pressure. Garrett found her there. "They say you stopped it," he said. "They say a lot of things." He hesitated. "I shouldn't have hit you." "No," she said, "you shouldn't have underestimated me." A pause. "I won't again." She believed him. When he left, she lay back and closed her eyes. Sleep came slowly. Not because she was afraid, but because some victories didn't feel like winning. They felt like surviving the truth. And sometimes, survival was the heaviest burden of all. Why did the quiet feel louder after everything stopped moving? She noticed it the next morning, standing alone on the training field while the sun climbed without ceremony. No alarms, no boots running, no raised voices cutting through the air, just wind, just breath, just the strange weight that settles in after a storm decides it's done with you. The base looked unchanged. That bothered her. She rolled her shoulders once, slow and deliberate, as if reminding herself she was still inside her body. The photograph sat folded in the pocket of her jacket. She hadn't looked at it again. She didn't need to. Some images branded themselves deeper when you stopped staring. Behind her, the rest of the team assembled. Fewer jokes now. Less noise. Men who'd slept poorly and didn't bother pretending otherwise. She took her place without comment. Garrett stood 2 spots away. Not close, not distant, a careful, learned distance. The instructor was gone, his name already being replaced in schedules, logs, and memory. The machine never paused long enough to mourn individuals. It only adjusted. Everett stepped forward, new authority, same voice, just slightly heavier. "Yesterday wasn't training," he said. "It was exposure." No one spoke. Exposure has consequences. Some of you will carry them, some of you won't. That's not a judgment. She felt eyes drift toward her, then away again. Good. They ran. Harder than usual, as if motion could outrun reflection. Sweat blurred vision, lungs burned, muscles protested. She welcomed all of it. Pain gave structure to guilt. During drills, she missed a step, just one. Her foot slipped half an inch on gravel. She recovered instantly, but she felt it, the crack in precision. That scared her more than the ambushes ever had. After training, she sat alone on the steps outside the barracks, unlacing her boots slowly. The sky had turned that soft blue that only appeared when the day decided not to ask anything more from you. Caldwell approached without announcement. He'd learned. "They're moving him tonight," he said. She nodded. "Witness protection," he continued. "Reduced sentence, cooperation." Another nod. "You don't agree." "I understand it," she said. "That doesn't mean it sits right." He leaned against the railing beside her. She's already in treatment, he said quietly. Experimental trial, she qualified. Her hands paused. That's good, she said after a moment. It is. Silence stretched, this one gentler. You could have let it burn, Caldwell said. You could have handed it off, stayed clean. I know. Why didn't you? She tied the second boot and stood. Because clean isn't the same as right. He watched her carefully. That line gets blurry. Yes, she agreed, but not invisible. He nodded once, respect, earned not offered. As he walked away, she felt the familiar pull of solitude, the kind that came not from being alone, but from being unable to share the weight of what you'd seen. That night sleep came hard again. She dreamed of corridors that never ended, doors that opened into the same room, a girl laughing somewhere she could never quite reach. She woke before dawn, breath shallow, heart steady but heavy. She dressed and went to the range. The first shot went wide. That stopped her. She lowered the rifle and stared downrange, jaw tight, wind steady, conditions perfect. The miss was hers. She adjusted, breathed, fired again. Dead center. She didn't smile. Perfection didn't comfort her anymore. Garrett joined her after a while, didn't speak, just took the lane beside hers, loaded, fired. His grouping was tight, controlled, but his third shot drifted. He cursed under his breath. Stop fighting it, she said quietly. He looked at her. Fighting what? The part of you that doesn't want to miss. He exhaled, reset, fired again. Clean. Thanks, he said. She nodded. They stood there a moment longer than necessary, the echo of gunfire fading into something almost peaceful. I heard what you did, he said. She didn't answer. They say you saved lives. They say things when they need the story to end. He studied her profile. You don't see it that way. No, she said. I see it as choosing who gets to live with what happens next. He absorbed that. You okay? He asked. She considered the question carefully. I'm functional, she said, which is different. That made him smile faintly. Later that week the debrief came. Closed room, limited clearance, sanitized language wrapping sharp truths. She spoke only when asked, precise, factual, emotion kept locked away. Afterward, Everett stopped her in the hall. You're cleared for deployment, he said. Frontline your call. She blinked. So soon. You've earned trust. Trust, such a fragile word. I'll go, she said. He hesitated. You don't have to prove anything. She met his eyes. I know. The deployment came faster than expected. Different terrain, different threat, same weight. On the transport she sat strapped in, hands resting on her thighs, eyes closed. The hum of engines felt familiar, comforting in its indifference. Across from her, Garrett checked his gear. You ever think about quitting? He asked suddenly. She opened her eyes. No, she said. I think about why I stay. What's the difference? Quitting is about escape, she replied. Staying is about responsibility. He nodded slowly. The mission was clean as missions ever were, precision, coordination, no surprises. Almost. A child ran into the street mid-operation, confused, terrified, out of place. Everything slowed. She moved first, dropped her weapon, stepped forward, hands open, voice low. The child froze. She remembered the photograph, the smile, the cost of choosing wrong. She guided the child back, safe, unharmed. The team covered without question. Later, when it was over, Everett said quietly, You risked the op. She met his gaze. I protected the point of it. He didn't argue. That night under unfamiliar stars, she sat alone again. The photograph stayed in her pocket. She thought of how close she'd come to letting anger decide, how easily she could have chosen differently, how thin the line really was. Strength wasn't loud, she'd known that for years. But resilience, that was quieter still. It was waking up after moral injury and choosing not to harden. It was carrying grief without turning it into cruelty. It was acting even when no one would ever know. As dawn crept over the horizon, she stood and shouldered her pack. She wasn't healed, but she was whole enough to keep going. And sometimes, she realized, redemption didn't come from erasing the past. It came from refusing to repeat it. Why did it feel wrong to be praised for something that still kept her awake at night? The commendation came folded inside a plain envelope, slid across a metal desk without ceremony. No applause, no audience, just a signature, a seal, and a quiet sentence that said her actions had exceeded expectations. She stared at it longer than necessary. Exceeded expectations. Expectations were such a dangerous thing. They were usually built by people who didn't have to live inside the consequences. Dismissed, Everett said gently, already knowing she wouldn't celebrate. She left the room and stepped into the corridor where life moved on with disciplined indifference. Boots echoed. Doors opened and closed. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly, the sound sharp against the hum of fluorescent lights. She folded the paper and tucked it away, unsure why keeping it felt heavier than throwing it out. The next deployment brief came before she'd finished unpacking from the last one. Different region, different enemy, same quiet urgency, same warning signs that never made it into official language. She listened without taking notes. She learned the danger wasn't in what was said. It was in what was left unsaid. That night she sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at her hands, strong hands, steady hands, hands that had saved people, hands that had hurt them too. She thought of the instructor's face the moment he'd realized it was over, not fear, relief. That haunted her. Garrett knocked once before stepping in. "You good?" he asked. She considered lying. It would have been easier. "No," she said, "but I'm here." He nodded. That was enough for him. "They put me on your element," he said, "if that's a problem." "It's not." A pause. "I trust you," he added quietly. That mattered more than he knew. The mission unfolded at night, the world reduced to outlines and breath, the kind of darkness that swallowed sound if you let it, the kind that tested whether discipline had truly replaced instinct. They moved clean, silent, purposeful, until the call came in wrong. Coordinates shifted, timing compressed, the kind of change that never came without cost. She felt it immediately, that tightening in the chest, that sense of inevitability. "Something off," she whispered. Command hesitated. "Proceed," came the reply, flat, final. She moved anyway. The ambush came fast, not loud, not dramatic, just sudden violence trying to pretend it had always belonged there. She took cover and returned fire with measured calm, not anger, not fear. "Focus." Garrett went down hard behind her. Not hit, just stunned, wind knocked out, vulnerable. She covered him without thinking, body angled, fire disciplined, time stretched. When it ended, the silence was absolute. No casualties, barely. As they exfiltrated, her hands shook for the first time in years. She hated that. Back at base, the after-action report was clean, too clean. "Command error," someone said, "bad intel." She didn't argue, but she started keeping her own notes again. Patterns, timings, decisions that didn't align. History didn't always repeat itself the same way. Sometimes it just rhymed quietly. Weeks passed, operations stacked, fatigue crept in sideways disguised as competence. She caught herself hesitating once, then again. Small things, too small to justify concern. Too big to ignore. Caldwell noticed. "You're carrying something," he said one evening as they walked the perimeter. "I always am. This one's heavier." She stopped walking. "I don't know how to put it down," she admitted. He studied the ground. "Some weights aren't meant to be dropped. They're meant to be redistributed." She frowned. "You don't carry them alone." That was harder to accept than danger. The breaking point didn't come with gunfire. It came with paperwork. A name she recognized, a reassignment request quietly denied, a recommendation buried. Garrett. She stared at the screen, heat rising behind her eyes. They were sidelining him, punishing proximity. She confronted Everett. That decision wasn't tactical, she said. It was convenient. Everett sighed, older suddenly. "You're not wrong," he said, "but this machine doesn't run on fairness." "It runs on people," she replied, "and people break." He met her gaze. So do systems, when enough pressure is applied. She left before she said something she couldn't take back. That night she didn't sleep. She thought of the girl in the photograph, of the child in the street, of Garrett on the ground, stunned and trusting. Of herself, standing at crossroads no one else could see. By morning, she'd made a decision. She submitted a request. Not for reassignment. For testimony. Formal, recorded, risky. Caldwell read it twice. "This will follow you," he said. "Yes. It could end things. Or change them." He nodded slowly. "You know what you're doing. I know what I can live with." The inquiry moved quietly at first, questions framed carefully, answers documented without drama. Then someone pushed back. Files went missing, meetings postponed. Pressure. She stayed steady. When she finally spoke in full, it wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was precise. She didn't accuse. She described. She didn't demand. She revealed. When it was over, the room stayed silent. Not because they disagreed. Because they recognized the cost of hearing the truth. Garrett found her outside afterward. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes," she replied, "I did." He searched her face. "You're going to be fine," he said, more hope than certainty. She smiled faintly. "I don't need fine," she said. "I need honest." As she walked away, the weight shifted slightly, not gone, but shared. And sometimes she realized courage wasn't charging forward. It was standing still long enough for the truth to catch up. Why did it feel like the hardest step forward was no longer on any battlefield? The waiting was worse than the fighting. She learned that in the weeks after the testimony, when nothing seemed to happen and everything quietly did. No orders came down. No consequences announced themselves. The base moved as it always had, efficient and indifferent, as if truth had not just been placed gently and dangerously on the table. She was still deploying, still training, still trusted with lives. And yet she felt watched. Not in a hostile way, not even suspicious. Measured. She woke earlier than usual now, before alarms, before routine could take over. Dawn became her companion. A time when the world felt honest, unedited. She'd sit with her back against the cool concrete outside the barracks, listening to the base inhale and exhale into another day. The photograph stayed in her pocket less often. Not because she forgot it. Because she didn't need it to remember anymore. Garrett was reinstated quietly. No apology, no explanation, just a revised roster and a nod from Everett that said, "I did what I could inside the lines." Garrett didn't ask questions. He understood what silence meant here. They worked together differently now. Not closer, just clearer, fewer assumptions, more trust earned moment by moment instead of granted by rank or history. On their last deployment together, they held overwatch for 6 hours without speaking. Wind cut across the ridge, dust clung to everything, time stretched thin. At one point, Garrett murmured, "You ever think about who you'd be if you weren't here?" She didn't answer immediately. "Yes," she said finally, "and I don't recognize her." He smiled at that, not sadly, not proudly, just honestly. Neither of them spoke again. The inquiry ended the way most things like that did. Quiet corrections, policy adjustments, a few careers redirected, a few truths buried deeper than before, but not completely. Not this time. Caldwell met her one last time in his office, the same one where so many careful conversations had taken place. "They won't say it out loud," he said, "but you changed something." She leaned against the doorframe. "Change isn't permanent," she replied. "It's maintained." "That's still something." She nodded. "What will you do now?" he asked. She thought about it. Not about rank, not about advancement, not about escape. "I'll keep showing up," she said, "and I'll keep noticing." He smiled. "That's more dangerous than most weapons." Her final mission came without drama. No last stand, no swelling music, no moment that felt like an ending. It was an extraction under poor weather, a mistake avoided, a team brought home intact. She watched the aircraft lift off and felt complete. Not triumphant. Complete. Weeks later, she stood in civilian clothes at the edge of the base, duffel bag at her feet. The decision hadn't been sudden. It had been patient, thoughtful, earned. Everett shook her hand. "You'll always have a place here," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm leaving." Garrett hugged her, awkward and brief. "Don't disappear," he said. She met his eyes. "I was never invisible," she said. "You just didn't know how to see me yet." He laughed softly. She walked past the gate without looking back. Not because it didn't matter, but because it always would. Months later, in a different city, she woke before dawn again. Same habit, different silence. She ran along empty streets, helped at a veterans clinic twice a week, spoke when invited, listened more often. She didn't tell her full story. She didn't need to. Some nights she still woke from dreams of corridors and alarms and faces she couldn't save. She sat with those moments instead of fighting them. Let them pass. Let them remind her she was human. One afternoon she saw a girl laughing outside a hospital, hair growing back unevenly, smile fierce and unafraid. She didn't stop. She didn't have to. As the sun dipped low, she stood at her window watching the city breathe. People rushing, people pausing, lives intersecting without knowing why. She thought about strength, how it wasn't dominance or volume or fearlessness. It was restraint. It was choosing not to harden when the world gave you every excuse to. It was standing your ground without needing an audience. And in the end, she understood something that had taken her years to learn. Dignity doesn't demand recognition. Resilience doesn't ask permission. And courage doesn't announce itself when it arrives. Sometimes, it just acts.